Welcome, great members of this planet. Welcome to tonight's webinar, Football Agents, What Parents Really Need to Know. My name is Ryan Mcknight. I'm really excited about the next 90 minutes. We've got three great guests joining us tonight. We've got esteemed football agent, Tony Sharkey. Hello, Tony.
Hi, Ryan. You okay?
Yeah, I'm well. Yourself?
Yeah, good. It's been a lovely sunny day, stuck inside up in Newcastle.
Fantastic, excellent. Also joining us tonight, we've got Sheffield Wednesday Academy coach, Spencer Fern. Spencer, how are you?
Hi, Ryan. Hi, Tony. How you doing?
Hiya.
Also joining us tonight, we've got the founder of Football for Football and ex-professional footballer, Julian Dow. Julian, how are you?
I'm very well. Good evening, guys. How are you doing?
We're all very well. Julian, quick question: is that real brick or wallpaper behind you?
Oh, yeah, I'm outside. The house is falling down.
Excellent, excellent. So listen to everybody. We've got a great number of people joining us tonight on the webinar, which is absolutely fantastic. We'll try and get through as much as possible over the next 90 minutes, but just a little bit of housekeeping, how we like to operate these webinars. And just as a bit of a task, just to get you using the toolbar if you've not used GoToWebinar before. I'd just everybody, first of all, on the question panel, just to let us know that you can hear and see us loud and clear, and just do us a favour and just say yeah, loud and clear, and also just let us know where you're tuning in from. So if you can just type that in on the question section on your toolbar, that would be absolutely brilliant. We've got Marco from Torquay, fantastic. Craig in Cardiff, excellent. Yeah, so just keep typing through. Rob in London, hi Rob. Lee in Bromsgrove. Oh, Dan, I think you pronounce it Daniela, all the way in New York City. Fantastic, absolutely brilliant. Oh yeah, Guildford, a couple more in London. Excellent, excellent. So it all looks like people can hear us, which is absolutely brilliant. Oh, Matt, Tony, we've even got somebody in Newcastle.
Is that not me?
No.
Who's that in Newcastle? Who's in Newcastle?
It's Mark. Mark's in Newcastle. So brilliant. Right, great. Thanks, guys. Thanks for doing all that. Now you found the question bar. I am going to be coming to people over the course of the next 90 minutes just to get your take on what the guys are saying and maybe ask you some direct questions as well. But if you have got any questions, we've got some time at the end. That's the section that I need you to type your question in, and I will see all the questions there, and I will come to them as we go throughout the night. And as I say, we've got a big section at the end to take those questions. Fantastic. Right, so the next slide, because I want to press on. So this is what we're going to be doing tonight. We're going to just have a few little introductions. We're going to start the night off with a poll to get what the general feel of the people that are taking part tonight think of agents. Then Tony's going to be giving us some information about the world of football agents, a history, what goes on at the moment, and of course, most importantly to you guys as parents or as coaches, you know, what are the current laws, and interestingly, what are going to be the future laws, because we're really at a crossroads at the moment in terms of where football agency is heading globally. Then we're going to come to Spencer. So Spencer works with the under-15s and the under-16s at Sheffield Wednesday. He's hugely experienced in the football industry and has come into contact with agents in many different ways, Spencer. So it's going to be really interesting. It's going to be really interesting to hear from yourself. Then we're going to get into a discussion with all three of the guys, and then we're going to talk about the role of a parent in players' development. So I think, you know, that's really interesting. Whilst the title is, you know, football agents and what parents need to know. I think that feeds in really nicely to talking about what the positive things and the negative things that go on in terms of the relationship between parent and player as well. Then we're going to speak with Julian specifically on his new resource, Football for Football, and certainly why we think as practitioners in the game, why we think that's going to be a really important resource for you guys as parents and as coaches moving forward. And as I say at the end, we've left plenty of time for some world-class questions that will hopefully stump the guys and make them squirm a little bit, and we'll get some good answers. If there's any wallpapering questions, I'll give you Julian's email address, and you can contact him directly.
Pink Floyd.
Pink Floyd, yeah, exactly. Okay, let's commence. So the next slide, so this is these are the people that we've got involved tonight. My name, as I say, is Ryan Mcknight. I've been a very lucky boy. I've spent my entire life working in the football industry. I've been chief exec of a couple of professional clubs. I've worked as a consultant right the way throughout the game, and I've had a great experience working in the football industry. I currently co-own a private football academy, and I continue to work in the industry with governing bodies and leagues, and also lots of other interesting training things that we do, which we'll speak about later on. As I mentioned, Julian was an extremely promising young footballer at Manchester United. I'm not saying it dipped there, Julian, but you obviously went on and had a professional career, which was fantastic, and Julian's got some great first-hand experience about some of the topics that we're going to be speaking about tonight. And obviously he's continued his career, and certainly over the last few years has been working up to producing this really interesting resource. Spencer's had like I say, an absolutely remarkable introduction into football. He'll touch on it in more detail when we come to him later, but he's owned clubs. He's worked in clubs, and now has rapidly developed his coaching career over the last 4 or 5 years. And Tony's been an agent for over 18 years now. I know he looks like he's in his 30s, but he's not. He's not. He cuts his own hair. He cuts his own hair as well, ladies and gentlemen. Let me tell you, and he does a very good job at it.
Doesn't everyone cut their own hair in lockdown now? So
no. But Tony's an extremely experienced and really well respected agent, and Tony and I've been lucky enough to do a lot of the work with him, has undertaken a lot of agent training in recent years, which should absolutely be applauded. Yes, so that's the cast for tonight. But as promised, what I wanted to start off with was a bit of a poll, just to gauge the feeling in the virtual room of what people feel about agents. So I'll crank up the technology here, and I will launch the poll. So if you can just pick an answer, click an answer. I'll disappear for about 30 seconds, and then we'll come back and we'll see what people are thinking. Here we go. Yeah, last few seconds then, please. Okay, we'll close the poll there. Tony, I want to come to you as the football agent. Before I share it, where do you think the percentages were spread out?
Well, there was 4 questions, so I was going to go middle, but where's the middle? I probably think
Neither good or
middle.
bad?
I think probably bad impression, bad reputation of agents as a negative. I would say more than that, more than the positive.
Julian, would you agree?
Absolutely. I think it's down to a misunderstanding and mistrust.
Okay, and Spencer?
I agree with Tony and Julian. I think it's not going to be painted in a positive light.
Oh, well, we're going to be surprised. I think we'll have to have a bit of a dig down on the old demographic
excellent.
of, yeah, so 80%,
Fantastic.
80% is a vital and positive part of the game, which is absolutely brilliant.
Got a good crowd tonight, Ryan.
Yeah, yeah, that's it. Those £5 notes came in handy. Brilliant. That's really interesting. As I say, as somebody that's worked in the football industry for a long time, has dealt with agents for a long time. Everybody knows that there is a public perception of agents, and I'm sure we'll get into the nooks and crannies of it tonight. But certainly, you can see against the volumes of money that are being spent on agents, questioning the necessity of the guys is really a sort of non-starter, because they are a necessity, and they are in rightly here to stay in some shape or form. Okay, so that's really interesting. That gives us a real good light in terms of where people are starting the night. But of course, what we're here tonight to talk about is information for parents and for coaches, certainly of young players. And I genuinely couldn't think of a better person to guide us through in terms of what the current landscape is of modern agents, modern British agents, than Tony. So we're gonna go straight into that, and we're right on time. Look at this, I'm doing a wonderful job. And Tony, can you just start off by, as the first point says there, just talk us through your experiences in the game and how you came about to be an agent.
Thank you, Ryan. I was really pleased with that, Paul. Actually, I was a footballer when I was young, so I've been through that sort of in going into the club at an early age, and then having a scholarship, it's an apprenticeship in my day, and getting a pro contract. So I've been through the first part of it, which is where I suppose many of you as parents and as coaches will be. So I've got experience of that, but when I left football and didn't make a full-time career of it, I did a PE degree. I'd worked in sports development for local authorities, and I set myself up as an agent. I was around 35 at the time, and there was no information about how to do it. There was no education, so I had to sort of teach myself. And I had to get into the business just by working at it, by building my network, building my connections, getting to know people at clubs, sending young players of all ages from Newcastle. We've got some good players up in Newcastle, sending them to clubs like West Brom, Scunthorpe, Hearts, Hibs, anyone who'd have them really. And I had my first successes, funnily enough, at West Bromwich Albion. What I would think generally, a bit of noise interference there, right? Can you hear that? What I think generally is that the landscape for parents got to be aware of the actual chances of making a professional footballer, and I think those chances aren't really spelled out by the clubs. I think the chances of making it are very, very slim, particularly going to start an academy at 8-year-old or 9-year-old, 10-year-old. The actual chances of getting right to the finishing point, which is a professional career, are very, very slim. I think that's an area that I've seen that is not explained by agents, and it's not explained well enough by clubs in some respects. I've worked with young players, and I've seen the good, the bad, and I've seen what's happened to other young players with the agents involved. I've seen and I've heard about players who had an agent, and as soon as he got released from a club, the agent wouldn't answer his calls. So I've seen some bad practice in the industry. But I've also seen, and like anything, I suppose any business, any industry, there's some good operators and there's some bad operators. The football agent business is no different. What we have found though is, who is educating themselves. There's no requirement now to educate yourself. There isn't. You can just apply for a license from the FA, a registration from the FA, and start up as an agent. So for me, the experiences that I've had, I've seen some really negative stuff, but I have seen some good work and good agent practices, particularly in this younger age group that we're talking about.
Yeah, guys, can you all hear okay? Nobody's got their mobile phone next to the computer or anything?
It's very, there's a crackly bit on the line. I don't know. That's better.
Yeah, I think it's
a bit better now.
Getting better, isn't it? Or maybe not.
Is it?
Oh, can you hear me?
Yeah, it seems it's all right now, is it?
Oh, that seems to have.
Spoke too soon.
So should I just continue, Ryan?
Can you hear me, Tony?
Yeah, perfectly well. Shall I just continue?
Yeah, I think it's settled down a little bit, hasn't it?
Definitely gone. It's gone, yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's COVID related, so we can blame everything else on that. So so Tony, if you could just rehash really in terms of who can be registered as an agent.
So really, until anyone can really register as an agent, as long as you're over 18, as long as you don't have a criminal record. You don't have to have any knowledge of the football business, and therein lies the problem. And as long as you're not a coach or an employee of a football club, you can pay your £600 to the FA and complete the forms and sign up as an agent. So it's pretty straightforward. Beforehand, some time ago, and when I started, you had to pass an exam and you had to do some studying to pass that exam. But in 2015, when FIFA deregulated the agent activities, deregulated agents, that exam was no longer in place. So what we found was, I think prior to 2015, there was about, I would say 450 agents in England. And now there's about, so in the 5-year period that followed it, there's about 2,500 now. So there's been a real influx of people into the agent business. And some of those people are friends of players, parents of players, the siblings. Some people are ex-players, which I feel is a good move. If more ex-players become agents who've been around the game, who understand the game, that's going to be a positive. But there's definitely been a lot of people who have chanced their arm, if you like, and thought, I'm going to make a career as an agent, and all I have to do is pay £600 to the FA, and then £300 every year after that. It's not a large sum of money, but where I would question is, without getting, a bit of education about how it works, how the business works, without understanding how the football business works, it's going to be a tough task for you. I noticed one of the questions on there is a child safety and welfare issue. I mean, I've done the FA safeguarding and welfare course, which is a 3-hour course, which I'd really recommend anyone who's looking after, working with children, working with young people, working with young players under 18. You need to do that. The other thing that I've got as well is a DBS check. All agents who work with players under the age of 18, if you're going to work with a player under the age of 18, you need to be DBS checked so that you've got no blemishes on your record, and that's through the FA as well. Looking down at your question, you've got, when should a young player first get an agent? And that's an interesting one, because I think if you're the next Jadon Sancho, who moved very young in his career, then he needed somebody to guide him quite early on. But for the normal, let's say the normal, the average player, most players who are going into clubs at the age of, when you properly go into a club at 16, as a scholar, you go through the academy route, you go through all the academy stages, you get offered a scholarship, and you start in a club. I would start that process myself. If it was me and I could go back in time, I would start that process as a 16-year-old in your first season in the club. But I would spend some time building relationships with the agent. Obviously, the parents and guardians are going to be doing that. And the reason I think it's good to get an agent at that age is because it might only be a year or two before they get released, and then they will need some agent to help them. They will need an agent to give them some advice and guidance. So that's my advice. You could wait till the second year of your scholarship, but then have you built up a relationship with the agent, and the agent's there. And this is one of the misconceptions. Agents aren't just there to do deals. They're not just there to do transfers. They're not just there to do renegotiations. They're there to help the young player right through his career. Any problems that he may have, he might be homesick, he might not be playing, he might be injured. At some point, you'll need some advice and guidance. And that's where I think, parents, if you're a parent of a player and you know the football business and you understand the football business, that's fine. But if you just, you may be a football fan and you're a parent and you don't really know the ins and outs of the football business, you need somebody to help you and help your son or daughter. So that's where I would probably start to look for an agent. You can't actually sign with an agent until you're 16 anyway. But you can start talking to an agent from so if your birthday is you're a September birthday, so you're 16 in September, you can start talking to an agent, getting a prospective agent from the January of that year. So it's the January of the year that you're 16, and if it was, so if for example your birthday was the 2nd of January, you could only start to talk to an agent on the 1st of January. So if you see what I mean, so that that protects young players as well as the parents and guardians.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Now there might be some parents out there that are thinking about becoming their son or daughter's agent. So I think it's really important to discuss in some detail that next point about what FIFA are proposing for agents moving forward. So can you put some meat on the bone on that?
Yeah. So FIFA, in their wisdom, deregulated agent activity in 2015, and now they're coming back to re-regulate the marketplace. And one of the reasons they're re-regulating is because they've seen some really big fees. Some agents, the Mino Raiolas with the Paul Pogba transfer, some of the agents receiving really substantial amounts of money, and FIFA see it as taking money out of the game. So they've tried to come back to re-regulate the agent business. And what they're proposing is education and training, which the agents, myself and all the agents are for, reintroducing the exam, having a central scheme to regulate agents, and also to put a cap on agents' fees. Now that's caused some consternation from the agents. The agents aren't happy with being told that they're going to have to cap their income. The cap was set quite low at 3%, although there is other things that come into it. It's not just as straightforward as a 3% cap, but that's where we are at the moment. FIFA are going to take control of the agent business, and they're probably, I think they'll probably put up the charges for agents to register. I'm sure that's a definite thing. But on the, if parents are out there, there's a few parents that, Neymar's dad's sort of making a fortune because his son's one of the best footballers on the planet. If there's parents out there thinking about, being your son or daughter's agent, then I wouldn't say don't try it, but what I would say is part of the job is building a network in football that you can rely on, so that if your son or daughter was released or was needing a loan or was moving to another club, you had the contacts and the knowledge to make that happen. And that's a whole it's a whole separate career. If you can go part-time in your job and support your child in his or her football career, then do so. But I would really recommend doing as much learning as you can. I do agent courses, come on them. There's other things out there, and really get yourself educated. But it is a 24/7 job, even if you've only got one client and that client's your son. And also remember that you're a mum and dad to them. So where does the agent role fit in, and where does the mum and dad stop? And I think that can get confusing as well. I mean, I tend to, when I'm talking to parents and players, there's a certain point where, as an agent, and it's usually at 18, where I have a conversation which goes something like this. It goes, look, I'm working for you. You're an 18-year-old. You're now officially a grown up, and whatever you tell me is in confidence. If you don't want me to say anything to your parents, that's absolutely fine. And I make that conversation and make that division at the age of 18, so that then the player, if he or she has issues or problems that they don't really want the parents to know, and it's a general football one or another issue, they can share with me, and they know that I'm working for them, and that's how I view the relationship with a football player, that I'm there to help them. I'm there to give them a better chance of achieving a professional football career, which is where we all want to be. And also, when you're dealing with clubs, sometimes, I mean, I don't know whether Spencer and Julian will back me up on this, but the club's vested interest is aligned with you and your son or daughter when they're doing well, and they can help the club, and they can become a first team player, and they can sell them for a lot of money. When that's not the case, and you'll soon be released and discarded, and there won't be a lot of aftercare either. So that's another issue of why you should get an agent at the right point.
Brilliant, thank you, Tony. Just on that last one, is there any sort of resources that parents can access and players to sort of build a positive relationship with the agent? And I think it's probably a good point to mention the 2 handouts that you've provided as well in that.
Yeah, so I've provided 2 handouts. One is if you just have a click on I think it's the right hand side as you look at it. One is a checklist for parents, so that you can see, it sort of lays out the rules and regulations. I've touched on them briefly tonight, but it lays out what you should expect in terms of the rules and regulations. The other handout is, if an agent comes up to you at a football match and says, hey, listen, I'm interested in your son or daughter, would it be okay to have a conversation about it? There's a couple of questions. Well, there's 14 questions there. I don't want you to read the riot act to them and go through the questions and tick them off, but that checklist of questions might be something that you can think about to talk with the agent, because what I think is important is that you as a parent understands exactly what the agent is going to do for you and your son or daughter. So we have examples of agents coming up from London to Newcastle, promising them more boots and kit and this and that, and I'll be at every game, and they never see them again, and they don't come back to the games. It's a long way to travel up on the train, and then they don't really help them in the career. They might get the first pair of boots free, and all that, and that just doesn't really do the job. So you want to really make sure what the contract is going to be, what are they going to offer, how are they going to do it, what's the contact arrangements, are they going to watch a lot of games, are they going to be there on the end of the phone for you in the early stages and for the player as well, all through his career.
That's great. And yeah, guys, so those two handouts are in your toolbar in the handout section. So feel free to download those throughout the next hour. So you've got them to hand. And I think, you know, I've obviously had a good look over them, and they're such a good little resource there. And you know, if you're following those steps as a parent, you won't go far wrong. Thank you, Tony. That was really informative. Thank you very much. We'll move on now to the coach's view, and Spencer Fern. Spencer, do you want to start off the same way? Do you want to give us a bit of a history on your experiences in the game?
Yep, sure, I will do. So many years ago, I was at Sheffield United as a kid. So I was there under 11s to under 16s. Got to the well, YTS as it was in those days, but wasn't good enough to make the grade. So played a little bit of football throughout my 20s. In my early 30s, when I was 31, I actually bought the worst football team in Britain, a team called East Stirlingshire, who were based in Scotland. So I had 4 fantastic years there. We weren't the worst team in Britain by the time I'd finished. But it was an introduction into football, and played at Ibrox, a few playoff semi-finals. So I had 4 years there at East Stirlingshire. A small break from the game, and then ended up as vice chairman at Stockport County, of course, where I met you, Ryan. We were in the Conference Premier, which was an interesting time. So 14 months there. And then I had a little bit of a break from the game and decided my route in football was going to change. Fed up with the boardroom, fed up with the stuffiness, and I wanted to be back on the grass, something I really enjoyed as a kid. So I started coaching grassroots and my son's under 7 side, and then got hoodwinked into helping a mate out on a Saturday in an adult side as well, and we did okay. And then ended up managing 2 non-league clubs, a team called Maltby, who were North East counties, and then Frickley, who were Everstick South at the time. So about 3.5 years managing non-league. Well, from Saturday, I ended up working at the club I support, Sheffield Wednesday. So I started off at under 12s and under 13s, and the last 2 seasons I've been working with the under 15s and 16s. So preparing those players, hopefully for scholarships at Sheffield Wednesday, or if not at Sheffield Wednesday, at another club. In terms of my education, I'm almost there with the A licence now, just a few loose ends to tie up when we finally get back. And I'm also a Johan Cruyff Master of Coaching, so I've been across Europe learning off different ways, different associations and federations. And I'm also qualified to degree level in management, strategic management and sports management. I'm currently doing a Masters in Sports Management with the Cruyff Institute.
And you've got 4 kids.
And I've got 4 kids. Surprisingly, I still have a wife as well after all that.
Yeah, so you've obviously, like I said at the start, you've had a sort of 360 sort of degree experience of the game. Talk to us about your experiences with agents across all of that, and then really, I suppose, finishing off really with your, obviously dealing with the 16s now. Your lads, as Tony mentioned, they could be speaking to agents from January the 1st year. So if you just take us through your experiences up to that point, please.
Yeah, I think the thing is, Ryan, it's like any sector or any industry, always going to have good and bad within it, and I've experienced both. When I was at Frickley, which is more semi-pro than non-league, we worked with an agent, players from York City to us, absolutely fantastic, no problems there, very professional. We've got 2 good players, it helped us along the road with that. And what you find, I suppose, in non-league and semi-professional as well, as Tony mentioned a little earlier, it costs 500 or 600 quid to become an agent, and you get lots of people pretending they have knowledge of the industry and giving bad advice to players. And that's something that I found along the road. And equally as well, something else that Tony mentioned, at the end of the scholarship period is extremely important. So do they get a pro deal or do they not get a pro deal? And we had a lad when we were at Frickley, who was 17 years of age, was with a championship club, and he came to us on loan, and at the end of the season he was released by the championship club. And what happened there is he was working with one of the big 4 agents. They promised him trials here, there and everywhere, and nothing ever transpired for him, which was unfortunate, and he's now playing at level 9 of the pyramid. So even though it was a big agent and may have done the boot thing, the shiny boots, and said he'd come to the games, in his real hour of need, when he didn't get a professional deal, they were left wanting. So, you know, the biggest isn't also necessarily the best as well. Well, I think my connection's been lost, Ryan. Have you got?
Well, yeah, no, we can hear you, but we can't see you.
Right, what's happened there? The audio connection's gone. Right, okay, we can hear you. That's cool. So, in terms of experience with the academy, and this is my personal view and not the view of Sheffield Wednesday, I think it's important that the players are under 16, if they are getting a I would definitely say the under 17s, so the second year of their scholarship, was like I mentioned a little earlier, at the end of it, it's either a pro deal where you need somebody to negotiate. Oh, I'm back. You see me now?
Yeah, you're back. Yeah, we heard you throughout. Yeah.
Good. So where you can negotiate a deal with the football club, or if they don't get a pro deal, there's somebody there who has the network and contacts to help them get a foot back in the door somewhere. And that's really, really important, because we know the chances of being a top professional are very slim. But if you've got an agent who's got a network, you know, if you use a championship as an example, in League One, League Two, National League, they're the kind of people that are going to help you keep you in the game.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting, isn't it? And it's definitely one for parents to think about. You know, Tony's mentioned it, and now you've mentioned it. There's obviously lots of positives of parents being a player's agent, in terms of course, they're going to want to do the absolute best thing.
Yeah.
But it's really critical, certainly in my view as well, of operating in the non-league as well, of that depth of network and knowledge of clubs and people within it. You know, just talk us through what, whilst you were managing at Frickley, obviously the boys that were coming out of the professional game down to the non-league, because that's the reality for the vast majority who are in academy football, isn't it? That's where they're most likely going to end up at best.
It really is, and it's a tough time. And you know, the lad I was speaking about a little earlier, he'd had 10 years within a championship club, and he was a very, very good player. It just happened somebody in his position was representing England, and that's the reason. You know, he didn't get a deal there, and it's very difficult when they come out of that system. And you know, at 18 years of age, they're still, you know, the young men, all right, but still kids in a certain way, and they need somebody to mentor them. And the parents, with the best will in the world, of course, they love the kids more than anything and want to do the best for them, but they don't have that knowledge of the industry and how it works. So for me, it's important. If you're a parent and you've worked in the industry and you know the industry, brilliant. You know, crack on. Your kids, you're going to look after them. But if you don't, and your experience is just watching them play games every Saturday or Sunday and watching match a day on a Saturday night, leave it to a professional, somebody who can really help them. And like Tony mentioned as well, it's that divide, you know, when are you a parent, when are you an agent, you know, and how does that work as well? And I think it's always good to get some independent advice. But for me, parents, if you're highly qualified, you're knowledgeable, yes, do it. If not, I'd leave it to people that are.
And Spencer, tell us, at Sheffield Wednesday, do you talk to the boys about agents? Do you do the academy give them information on? Do you give the parents information as well in terms of what is and isn't allowable? And you know, what are the discussions around agents? And do the boys talk about agents as well?
In terms of the parents' education, very much so. Our head of education and the PFA, we do a lot on agents, because it's a new world, of course, for the parents generally, first time they've experienced it. So there's a lot of parent education that goes on. With the lads, you know, I don't hear the lads speaking about it much. There's one or two that are represented now who've, you know, done well and got scholarships probably a bit earlier than the rest of them. There is always the danger, though, at, you know, 15, you know, leading into 16, that they get an agent and they see that as a bit of a status thing. That they've cracked it. So when they're at school, I've got an agent, you've not. And I think it's about us being aware of who's represented and keeping the feet on the ground as well. Because at 15, 16, you most certainly haven't made the grade. But when they get an agent, it depends on the quality of the agent as well. Some are good, some are bad.
Yeah, and at Sheffield Wednesday, in terms of coming to watch the games and things like that, do you recognise that there are agents at the games, or do you,
Yes.
or you know, or is there other parents there that you think or extended family members that are there for, you know, the idea of trying to represent one of their family members, or do you see it?
Yeah, generally with the agents, like the opposition scouts, usually stand away from the parents. I don't know if that's a norm at all clubs, but that's generally what happens. You know who they are. So a lot of them are ex-pros as well, you know, working for some of the bigger ones, some that we won't be aware of, I'm sure. But in terms of my role as a coach with the 15s and 16s, I don't have much dialogue with them. It's not my role, to be fair. If a player asks me my opinion, you know, I'll give my opinion. But the parents, they're the ones that need to make the decisions. And again, we have, you know, an open door policy. If parents want to come to speak to us about any concerns or any advice, then we do that, of course.
Yeah, and as Tony talks about, you know, we're going to see a big change in how agents are regulated, and the potential to bring the tests back as well. You know, what's your opinion of that, and what do you think the sort of coaching fraternity will think of greater regulation of agents moving forward?
It has to happen for me. Speaking from a non-league perspective, some of the people I was dealing with who, you know, said they were agents, I mean, they were registered, but really weren't advising the players particularly well. And as a manager, you know, you've got an investment in the players. You want them to succeed, and you know, at the level at Frickley, to go on and, you know, make a name in the game. And some of the people that were representing some of the players, it was like, wow, yeah, you may have your registration, but you really don't know what you're talking about. And I think for me, the exam, it needs to come back. We need to really clamp down on this. You know, people setting up and, you know, promising the earth when, you know, people who are respectable have been in the game, you don't do that. And be an agent is not just, as again, as Tony said, getting that player the deal, contract, the boots. It's about being a mentor. And to be a mentor, you need to have the knowledge and experience in the industry. And unfortunately, that's lacking a lot in the semi-professional game.
Have you come across it yet with any of your boys, certainly in the under-16s, that have started talking about what their agent is saying? Has that found its way into dialogue with you, or?
Not with me. Not with me. The thing is, for us, that if they have an agent, it doesn't concern us. All we're bothered about is how hard they're going to train on that particular day, and that's all we're interested in. So, yeah, they would. I don't think they'd mention it in front of the coaches. I'm sure the boys mention it in the little WhatsApp groups and when they're all chatting before training. I'm sure that happens.
I know we spoke earlier on today, and you were telling me about some of the metrics of players playing the game versus those that actually end up with deals. I think that would be really useful for the people to hear.
Absolutely. I mean, I love a stat, as you know, Ryan. So I was doing a little bit of preparation in advance tonight. So, you know, the parents and the carers is to understand the actual chances of your son playing in the Premier League. Now, in England, there's about 8.5 million males. I'm speaking about the male game because that's what I work in. 8.5 million males play football in England. 2.5 million 5 to 15-year-old boys play football. Now, in September 2018, in the first 2 months of the season, there was only 113 English players played in the Premier League in the first couple of months. Now, fast forward to August 2019, that opening weekend, there were only 83 English players played in the Premier League. Now, there's 2.5 million boys between 5 and 15 playing, so very, very difficult to make it as a top Premier League player. Of course, there's good money in the Championship, but, you know, if you're playing Premier League or Championship, maybe you could retire at the end of your career. If you're in League One or League Two or further down, that's not necessarily the case. There's a documentary which you guys may remember called No Hunger in Paradise a couple of years ago, and I think one of the stats that was used there, that if your son's in an academy at under 9, the chance of him playing as a Premier League professional and having a career is something like 0.012%. That's for people within an academy. I think there's 0.5% chance of being in an academy and actually making it as a professional. So it's very, very difficult to become a pro. And I was speaking about parents a little later, but something to bear in mind, you know, with your son or indeed your daughter as well, because there's almost 1 million girls between 5 and 15 that are playing the game as well, and that becomes more professional.
Yeah, I mean, it's just staggering numbers, isn't it? And obviously, you know, what we're talking about tonight is whether an agent can help you sort of increase the chances of that widening the percentage, and obviously, and if you are going to do that, what's the pros and cons of that being that being a parent. Just as a sort of summary for yourself, Spencer, in terms of obviously, as we mentioned, you've got four kids of your own. Would you ever want to represent your children as their agent?
No, I wouldn't. No, I wouldn't. For me, I'm not a qualified agent. I'm a football coach or a previous football club owner. For me, if my son was 14 years of age, if he ever needed representing, I don't think he will. I don't think he'll make it as a pro, which is fine. He enjoys his football, which is the main thing. But if he was represented, I'd get somebody who's been around that particular part of the industry for many years to advise.
Yeah, absolutely. That's absolutely spot on. Can you all hear me? Okay.
Yeah, we've got you. Sounds like your dishwasher's going now.
Hello.
Yes, we got you.
Oh, we're back. I tell you what. It's playing with us tonight. It's playing with us tonight, definitely. But you can see me and hear me, okay?
Right, Ryan. One of the things that Spencer said, I was just gonna, because I sort of said, well, look, get into the club on your first year of scholarship, and then start looking at potential agents, just for the very same thing. But I also think the agent can help you while you're playing games, because I think as you in your first year as an under 17, you're playing in the under 18s team. The agent is there also to give you a bit of feedback and a little bit of independent advice. So if the agent's watching you once a month or twice, whatever, then they can give the player individual feedback as well, and sort of say, look, because not all players get individual feedback, and it's not just to shower them with praise, it's to say, look, this is what I think you need to work on, this is what I think you need to improve on, and to talk about the game, and to talk about how they can get better. And I think, like I said, it's not about the deals, it's more about helping them to try and be the best that can be as well. So the longer you've got with them to talk to them and help them with that, the better. If they do get released at the end, you've got a good relationship, you understand the player, and you've also helped them in that period to try and get that pro contract, which at 18, I don't know the percentages, but it's very few get them at 18, don't they?
Yeah,
absolutely.
I think it's important that as well, Tony, is that for agents like yourself who's played the game and been involved a long time, and I think that's key when giving feedback to players as well, because some agents will give feedback to players and, without being rude, they don't know what they're talking about when it comes to the game. And that's a great danger as well, and it will conflict from the manager or the coach at the club. And that's why, for me, it's important. Again, if my son was being represented, it's somebody with a wealth of experience and knowledge who represents him, not somebody who's, everyone has to start somewhere. I get that, but we're seeing it a lot, particularly in non-league, that we're getting agents giving players advice on the subject that unfortunately they don't know a great deal about.
Yeah.
Okay. Look, we'll move on. We'll move on whilst the internet connection is good. I think my girlfriend's watching the Tiger King. I think it's taking all the bandwidth. Okay. Let's move on. To have a discussion between the three of us, the four of us, sorry, on the role of the parent and the guardian in player development. So, at this point, I want to bring in Julian. Julian, can you just start off by just giving everybody a bit of an overview of your experiences, please? Can't hear you, Julian. Oh, you there, mate? Oh no, I think we can't hear you, Julian.
No, we've got it gone.
I think you're self-muted, Julian. I wouldn't use the. I'd maybe lose the headphones if you can hear me.
Hello.
Hello.
Well,
Hello. How are you?
We're back. We're back.
Have you got me?
Got you.
Right, superb. So basically, I was one of those, proverbial best players in the world at 14. Everybody clambering for me, but unfortunately, I didn't have a parent who even could take time out to watch me play. Like I said, my mum brought me up, so I was negotiating with pro clubs, with boards at 15, 16, and I was offered a pre-contract with a Premier League club at 15, where effectively I signed a guaranteed pro for when I was 17. And now again, it was one of those where it was binding on the club side, obviously not on mine because I'm a minor, and it was probably a bit underhand to a certain degree. But I didn't know the importance of that, and I didn't really, because I had nobody guiding us that side, I didn't know the significance of it. So I left this Premier League club where I've got this offer because I become a bit disillusioned with the game, and then lo and behold, I just carried on playing grassroots football. Then that's about 16, 17, well 16. I thought I'd better go and sign for someone because that's what I want to do. So I ended up signing for a League One club, and again they signed me straight as a professional. Now I didn't know about the caveats you could put in there, performance related, and it was in the old days where it was like a YTS. So the League One club were taking my wage, taking my YTS wage, and topping it up to save them some money. Now that all works well and good until you're injured. And then when I got injured, then I didn't know I was getting paid off the club, whether my insurance, and that's when the PFA stepped in. Unfortunately, Brendan Batson and Mick Maguire basically said to the club, "You're absolutely taking the rise with this kid. You negotiated underage, so you better give him a proper contract." And luckily, it elevated me. But then that caused its own problems because the manager then left, and I'm third highest paid player at the club at 17. So, and then with being injured, so again, this is where an agent would be brilliant for you, because to just take that heat off, because I'm there trying to back my own corner and trying to play, and then as soon as you don't have a good game, the manager's onto you saying, "You want that? You've asked for this," and it's coming right back at me. So it made me fall out of love with the game to a certain degree because I didn't have that buffer. And then when I came to the end of my contract with this club, I burnt so many bridges within the game, within the club, because I was fighting the fight, that I was seen as a problem case. Unfortunately, the PFA again sorted me out, and he ended up going to Sweden for the summer because I'd missed so many games before the end of the season, and then I ended up going to Spain. So I'm playing for a Spanish club at 18, and again, the agent side, they did well for me, but it was a case of just doing the deal, and there was no real pathway. They weren't checking the credibility of the club. The club's got an English player, and I've just got stuck there. I didn't know about this was pre-Bosman. Only 3 foreigners could play. I was one of 8, and all the rest were full internationals. So it was very, very, it made my career stutter because I was used to playing games, wanted to play games. And then I always ended up chasing my tail. So again, an agent for me in that particular guise would have been brilliant, because it would have, I had the currency and what I could play and how I was perceived as a player, but because the way I was talking to clubs, because I just thought, go to a club to get the most money, as opposed to what's the pathway, what's your reserve team like, where do you see me playing? So I had a problem as being a 70-year-old money grabber, where this is where an agent, I think, like you mentioned before, Tony, and we spent, if you've got an agent who understands the player, understands the pathway, then they can start marrying you and dovetailing to the right club, knowing the kind of individual and the person that they're dealing with.
Yeah, and Julian, what's your perception on what the two guys have had to say so far in terms of whether parents should consider being an agent, and what they would need to do if they are to go down that road?
Fortunately, again, just jumping straight into football, I've dealt with some players who are Premier League players who've got children who are in academies who have actually turned pro. And I said, why aren't you being their agent? He goes, I'm the dad. And like you said, there will be a definite crossover, you know, because, and again, where you've got a parent who is the agent, they can't be subjective. And if they do try and act on a business level, sometimes that player just needs the dad to speak to or the mother to speak to. They don't need an agent, and sometimes they need an agent to speak to the mum and the dad. And if it becomes clouded, it can mess the player up because he's going into the club with mixed messages.
Absolutely. Tony, can you tell us about some of the experiences, good and bad, that you've had with parents of talented young players?
Yeah, I mean, I sort of I've had some decent experiences. I think it depends on, you know, when you sit down, the first meeting with the parents and a player is a pretty key meeting, because you're sort of trying to work out the dynamics of, and you know, in the early days of being an agent, I started to speak quite a lot to the dad instinctively about football and what have you. And then I realized it had, you know, it was a mistake, because sometimes it was the mum who was the key figure, the person who was, you know, the dad was maybe just supporting and going along watching games, but it was the mum who quite often had the sort of business perspective and had a bit of a more rounded view of where the son or daughter was going. I think there was one particular player that I think his dad was just so overpowering for the young man. He was probably damaging his career more than helping. He was literally trying to be his agent. He was overhyping the player. He was building him up. He was telling him how good he was every single week, and you know, I just couldn't have that, because it was just too much positive. When you know, he wasn't the world's best player, and he still had a lot to learn. And I think it's the point Spencer made it really well, where I think even if you end up being the best player in the world, you've got to stay grounded, and you've got to, you know, realize that it's a work in progress every single day of your football career. And I mean every single day, right up until you're 30 and whatever, you're still learning, you're still working at it, you're still trying to stay in the game, be the best you can. So for me, I've had a mixed experience of parents. I mean, you know, the ones who I think are the best ask the right questions as well. You know, the parent will say to you, right, so what do you think about where he is now? Where's he going to progress next? And those sort of questions are more about the player development than the actual, right, what are you going to do for him? You know, where's his career going to go? And especially, there's some critical moments in football players' careers. Obviously, one is moving clubs, but one of the biggest ones is being released, and everyone here has been released at one stage by a club, and that is a very emotional time for a young player. That's one of the critical ones. So moving club, being released, being injured. If you're injured for a long time, that can affect you mentally, psychologically. How does that get dealt with at the club? So some of these key things, and then if something bad happens to you outside of football, that'll be a critical part of a player's career. And all these things need managing. It's very rare you get a player like Gary Neville. I use Gary Neville as an example because Gary Neville speaks out against agents. But when you look at his career path, he's gone into United as a youngster. He's played in a fantastic under-18s team. They've won the FA Youth Cup. He's then got a pro deal. He's then in the first team. He's then in England. And his career's just gone like all the way up. And so some of them critical moments haven't really happened to him. And he's had all that. Every time he goes in to see Alex Ferguson, he's a new deal. He's better money. He will have had advice and guidance. And I think his dad was his agent. Is that right, Julian?
Neville, yeah.
Yeah, and it's you know, in the good times when everything's going like that, it's quite easy to be an agent of that sort of player. It's when the pathway can be up and down. You know, Spencer at Sheffield Wednesday, he didn't release Jamie Vardy, but Jamie Vardy was released from Sheffield Wednesday.
It still hurts now, tell me that. It still hurts.
What's that?
It still hurts now, that Jamie Vardy.
Well, what a good player he would have been for Sheffield Wednesday. But anyway, that's another.
Yeah.
But what I'm saying is the pathway is never, or very rarely, just very straightforward. It's usually, you know, got its ups and downs in it.
Yeah. Spencer, obviously you're really at the coalface with working with players that are trying to work towards a scholarship. Tell us about the relationships that you as a coaching staff have with the parents. And I want to ask you a really difficult question as well.
Thank you.
And that question is, how much does that relationship and what the parent is like with you and the coaching staff and the club impact on potential decisions about the perception around the player?
Yeah, I think to start with, around your difficult question, it doesn't impact at all with the player. Not at all. We're there to do a job, and we base it on their football ability, their character, and many different things. So that doesn't affect things. I do know a friend of mine, and he doesn't know I know this actually, but he had a son, a league, I think probably a League One club, and his son was an under 14, a very talented player, and because he was an absolute nightmare of a parent, they got rid of his son.
Yeah,
and that was his dad. And he still doesn't know this. He's probably not logging in tonight, so that's fine. But it can affect decisions that are made by some clubs, you know, without a doubt. The player, the parent and the coach relationship is absolutely critical. It really is, because we're doing our bit on the grass, but also we need to be that backed up by the parents as well. At our club, we have some very good relationships with the parents. You know, we're very open. We speak to them, and what we do with the players, we ask them to do self-reflection every week, where we provide feedback within 24 hours, so the parents have access to that. They can see that, you know, little Johnny needs to develop this or that, and he's doing well in this area. It's really important. But you know, speaking aside of Sheffield Wednesday and, you know, colleagues who are coaches as well, I mean, you know, what parents sometimes do is get a little overexcited, where they think they can go and tell the coach what tactics are correct or question decisions that they've made. And you know, what we have to bear in mind, that at grassroots level, the volunteers, so somebody's looking after our son or daughter, giving up their time, in there on a Sunday morning when it's chucking it down, doing the bibs, doing the washing and everything else. And they're volunteers. And I think parents and carers sometimes be a bit more aware of that. You know, they're not Pep Guardiola or Jose Mourinho on a Sunday morning. They're doing this so their kids can get some physical activity and build all the great skills that come with football. In addition to that, with academy coaches as well, you usually find the UEFA A license. So when you've got someone who probably, you know, maybe is an accountant who watches Match of the Day once a week, questioning tactics and how training's going, again, you probably need to take a little step back. So parents are important, but I think sometimes what does happen, they overstep the mark. And what we need to try and build with our young players, and Tony and Julian spoke about setbacks, is how they build resilience. It's absolutely critical. And it's not a smooth pathway to the top. It's not a smooth line. There's going to be a lot of bumps in the road, and parents need to be aware of that. My son's 14. He's been in an academy twice. He's been released. Horrific for him. But what I will not allow him to do is blame the coach or blame other players or anything else. It's about him taking responsibility for where he's at. And if he wants to be a pro, he's going to have to work harder. So I think as parents, we've got a big role to play, and we want the best for our kids, of course we do. There's nothing better than watching them play any sport and doing well. However, they need to have setbacks. They need to have disappointment, because as they go through life, they're going to get them. So resilience is a big thing. But we're very open with the parents. Long-winded answer to your question. We have very good relationships. If, you know, a player's been playing 4 or 5 games, he's not playing the next game, we'll have a chat with his parents, we'll have a chat with the player and explain the reasons why. That is critical, that we do explain the reasons. Not for debate or not for their opinion. This is why, and this is what little Johnny needs to be doing to start next week.
Spencer, do you think there is a bit of a vacuum, a bit of a sort of black hole in terms of how we've viewed the stakeholders in football? And actually, we don't really provide much for the parents, do we, in terms of, and I'm talking from a sort of top-down level, a governance level down, in terms of really painting the picture of what the likelihood is and what the realities are for versus what the ambitions are of course of a lot of parents. Yeah, sorry, Julian, do you want to jump in there?
Only because I've just had this conversation not so long ago with the head of development things at Man City, and Man City are very averse to doing any sort of media type things. But because obviously we're a resource, he wanted to get this message out, and we sat down. He did about an hour and 40 minutes interview, and he says, "The reason why I wanted to do this," he goes, "we speak to these young players, and Spence, you'll say the same thing, but he's bringing them in a little earlier in the dev phase, and he's saying, we like, your child. We think they've got a chance. We want to create put them in an environment where we hope we can develop them and nurture them." And then he goes, gets his next breath out. By then, the parents' eyes have glazed over. And then his next line is, "But to get from our academy to our first team, your child is going to have to be world class, because we are going to buy world class every year." And again, it comes back to the parent side. And again, Spencer, you're probably in that situation where you might have a talented child. He's coming in, and you've got to balance it. You've got to give them the props because you want to keep them and retain them. Then, depending what kind of mentality and relationship the parents got, you've got to be careful what you feed back. We want to keep the child because we think the best in the group. But if you relay that too early to the parent, all of a sudden they get a bit elevated. And then
absolutely, I think there's a great quote I saw the other day that talent gets you a scholarship, character gets you a professional career. And I think that's very important. It's not just about talent. And there's this notion amongst parents that this player's talented, so they must make it. Absolutely not. And I'm going back, many years ago. I was in a very good Rotherham boys side with people like Richie Barker, Scott Jones, who played for Barnsley, Ian Breckin. And at that stage, they were the most talented in the group. Or they had character and they had desire and they'd work harder than everybody else. And they had some fantastic careers. And Paul Hurst was that same age group as well, recently the manager of Shrewsbury. So it is your character and it's your desire and how much you want to improve, not just based on doing a few step overs and hitting a 30-yarder from time to time.
But Spencer,
Julian could do that.
Yeah.
Sorry?
Julian could do that.
But Spencer, I guess just sort of feeding back into what your experiences have been over the past few years, the knowledge that the gap knowledge that we're talking about, of course we're talking generally, because as you say, some parents have either played or whatever. The gap knowledge, it's not impenetrable, is it? Because like yourself, you've gone out there and you can access the knowledge and you can develop the knowledge as well. So what would you say on that? It's obviously a huge commitment though, isn't it?
Yeah, I think what we need to do, like Julian says about City, that they're looking at doing this. I remember listening about John McDermott, I think who was at Tottenham Hotspur, very similar to City. They get everybody in, they have the nice sign in at White Hart Lane, and then it'd be bang, by the way, your chances are this much of being a professional. I think Chris Ramsey was saying at the time that it puts a real downer on things, but that for me, we need to be real, we need to be open with parents. This is the reality, the stats that I quoted a little earlier. This is the reality of the situation. And if your son or daughter has a professional career in sport, absolutely fantastic. And we don't want to destroy their dreams. But what we need to do is say, it's really tough and it's an unbelievable industry to get in if you do it. But we need to educate parents more. And I don't just think in football as well, Ryan. I think across all sports. We're a bit sometimes we don't want to upset them because we want them at our club. Let's be open with parents and let's tell them what the deal is and how what the reality of the industry is. And I think by doing that, I don't think there's much pressure on the kids. Because sorry, Julian.
So I know when you said it's across the sports, but I think it's across society now. I just don't think that the dynamic shift between parent and child, the say children have changed. I think the way we communicate with them has. Yeah. There's too much tolerances, there's too much leeway, where before we'd be quite linear. Now it's all about self-expression, but we're letting them experience things, which is correct, but we're not giving them reference points along the way.
No, that's a great point, Tony. Just before we move on from this, I guess I just want you to sort of conclude, really, because obviously you're the agent you're the agent.
Yeah.
How would you define how a parent or guardian can best serve their child in the ambition to become a professional footballer?
Yeah, I mean, I think we've touched on a few of the points there, and I think it is about, being realistic with them, being, knowing that this is a dream, and listen, I'm very much in the camp of you've got to follow and you've got to chase your dreams, and just a parent who's there when they're needed. Some of the players don't actually like the parent. I had a player made his debut for West Bromwich Albion, first team debut, and his dad came to the game, but we didn't mention it to the son because he didn't want his dad there. It was a bit more added pressure. So the parent can sort of be there and fit into what the player requires from them, and is there if they need them. And I think being there if you're needed is the main thing. My dad, talking from personal experience, he would just come and watch the games. He'd never really give me much feedback unless I asked for it, and I think that's a good starting point. But the other thing to say is that if they're gonna make it as a professional footballer, they're gonna have to make some really big sacrifices. And I'm probably speaking to the converted parents and coaches who are listening in. Yep. So, you do really need to get as busy as you can, training-wise, working on your football ability, whether it's the gym, whether it's swimming, whether it's running, whatever. And you've also got to try and, what are players doing in their own lifestyles? Healthy eating's a good thing for parents to help them with. Eating like a sportsman is a good thing for parents, mums and dads, to cook. Or, get the players cooking the right stuff, eating the right stuff as well at home. So there's loads of things that parents can sort of wrap around, but they've got to create the space for this individual, this exceptional individual who's going to go and make a career out of it, because he's not just going to turn up for the hour's training or an hour and a half's training and then come home. He's going to be immersing himself in this football life. And I think the support of that, particularly, if they have to go, I left home at 16, went to Leeds United. So I was away from home. And if they're away from home, that's another dynamic that parents have to spend time. You're going to have to travel to games. Do you want them coming home as much? Probably not. Keep them down there. If they're happy to stay down there, it's better for their integration. So there's lots of things that parents can do. But one size doesn't fit all for young people, does it? Everyone's different. And I think having those conversations is good with your son or daughter.
Yeah, I think you've some really, really good points there. And just to add to them, what my experience of life has been is that as you get older, what you were told were sacrifices actually turned out they weren't sacrifices. A lot of my mates who were better than me but didn't get to have the experiences perhaps that I had because they were out on a Friday night or something like that. And no, they don't talk about those Friday nights now, but we like to reminisce about the games that we played in or the stadiums that you've played in, Julian. So I always think when we say to young players, you've got to make sacrifices, I think to myself, and I've changed my point of view there, are they really sacrifices? Are they really sacrifices, or are you actually just doing the right thing? And the other one I want to leave with, and I spoke about this the other night, and I think it's a big one for parents to consider, because when I speak to a lot of parents, and I always ask them the question, for your boy to be a professional, who's he in competition with? And a lot of the time we're limited by our own geography and our sort of clique that we live in. But there's two things. If you look at the demographics of professionals across all leagues across Europe, your competition is a kid in West Africa, a kid in South Africa, a kid in Australasia, a kid in North America, not just a lad in Newcastle or Gade or Bladen or Gateshead or wherever. Your competition of your son is anybody anywhere in the world right now. And some of the volume of practice that go in other parts of the world is just phenomenal. I've been fortunate enough to spend a lot of time in Africa, in South America, and we're great on the PlayStations. We're absolutely brilliant on the PlayStations here. The volume of practice that goes in those sort of some of those third world countries, and you can see that in the demographics and the numbers of players who are playing in the top leagues. The biggest nationality of Champions League players is
Brazilian.
Absolutely. Right, we're going to move on, because I pride myself on my timekeeping, and most of our technological issues have stopped. I'm going to point the finger of blame at Julian's headphones. I think there's
the Dre Beats CV19. What are they?
Exactly. But it's great to have you with us, Julian, tonight. For lots of reasons, but absolutely one is obviously the website that has really recently gone live, and I know it's been years in the making, and I really do think it's interesting for the guys that are on the webinar tonight to learn about what the philosophy of it was, and also what it is that you're actually providing, because it's absolutely not just another football website about things that are going on in football, is it?
No, not at all. And I think when you asked me beginning, my background, that's what really built Football for Football, because I don't want another child or a promising player, male or female now, who hasn't got that parent who's got the education support to really maximize the opportunity. And as Spencer knows, and Ryan, you alluded to, it's not always the best players who make it. It's the ones who understand the requirement and prepared to translate that. And with Football for Football, we looked at the stakeholders you mentioned are the players, the coaches, and the parents. So we've created dedicated content for each of those demographics. And the reason why it's taken so long, Brian, as you mentioned there, because you talk about PlayStations. I was with an academy coach a couple of months ago, and he said, I've got my young players learning football from somebody who's got 200,000 YouTube followers. I want him to learn from somebody who's played 200 games. So that's what we've put together. We've got players from non-league right the way up to, guys who've captained teams in the World Cup, because each one's got the story. Like you mentioned there, there's no linear formula. There are required ingredients. How you put them together are completely different. And it's a case of making this knowledge open, because Spencer, you deal with a lot of players. It'd be very hard for you to have a one-on-one with every single parent at any given time, at every part of the week, but they expect it.
Yeah, it's very difficult, Julie. I mean, in our 15s and 16s, we'll have about 30 players. So you think of all the parents, and we have the review process every 6 weeks. But apart from that, very, very tough.
And it's when they've had that review, Ryan, when they go back to reflect, they're reflecting within their closed group. The parents telling them that they're great. They might not have an agent. If they've got an agent, they can probably dissect it. But if they haven't, they can go on Football for Football, and they can hear Premier League footballers, League Two footballers talking about those assessments and what they did to either reinforce them or to correct them. And especially with young players going into academies, people say they shouldn't be clubs shouldn't sign players at 5 and 6. They shouldn't. I say, why not? If it's free training, it's free training. They don't know it's got an end goal. It's training. And if it's, I don't say you get released. You have a redirection, not rejection. The pressure comes from the parent putting it on the child. Again, what really pushed this was a friend of mine, similar sort of thing what you mentioned, Spence, where the parent is that much an antagonist at the club pulling him away. His child got the 6-week trial at 10 years old, and this kid, he's got the left foot like a hammer. And unfortunately, because his dad had told him at the end of this 6 weeks, you get a contract, that's what those kids have got that tracksuit on. When the club were just a bit unsure and wanted to give him 3 weeks, the kid almost had a nervous breakdown, because the dad had said, after 6 weeks, he goes, Dad, why are they still telling me to come down and not giving me a tracksuit? That kid doesn't know it's a trial until the parent tells him. So we want to give this education from academy directors, from managers, and from players and agents. Thankfully, Tony's done some stuff for us, because it's great that these webinars take place and somebody can hear this as a one-off, but I want to create a continual point of reference where a parent can go on, get some reassurance, get some validation, get some contradiction, like relax, he's done well, but, and I can talk from experience now, my son, me and the mum aren't together unfortunately, but he was at Accrington Stanley, and then he's got bought by a Premier League club for a lot of money at 11 or at 10. Again, trying to tell the parent, you know, the resident parent, that he was the best player in his position in 2008 within an hour's distance of travel doesn't resonate. They don't understand. They think he's made it, and I'm seeing him now going, I know he's struggling because they've told him too much too early. They've told him about the money that has been bought. They've told him that is this, where they don't know about the pathway. So Football for Football wants to cover all the facets that Tony mentioned. So what to eat, how to train, what to do when you're injured, you know, best practice on, you know, products, because as we mentioned, not every player is going to be a Premier League player. Not every player is going to be a professional footballer. But if we can maximize that opportunity and maximize that participation by imparting them with the knowledge that the game's best players use, then they've got a better chance. Because the grassroots game that everyone talks about, and it's underserved, it is, and they've got these volunteers and they're doing great, but the only people giving education to grassroots people are grassroots people, so it's going to stay grassroots. So for the first time, Football for Football will open it up and say, look, this is what the elite do, and it's free. So take and use what you use and decide, and maximize it. Just go to that point there, that quote that Danny Welbeck said there. This is where you've got a great parent. So Danny Welbeck was at Man City, and they released him just before Christmas. And his dad didn't tell him because he didn't want to spoil his Christmas. So he said, Danny, my job's changed. I can't travel to, where City were at the time. It was like still at Platt Lane. Do you mind if we go there? Because they knew that United wanted him. And he goes, oh, yeah, fine. So that little bit of psychology. So he's not experienced that rejection just to do or go somewhere else and train. And that's the power of a parent who's knowledgeable, got the child's best interest at heart, and realizing it's a journey, not a destination.
That's a great little anecdote. Fantastic. So Julian, just where do people go? Do they need to sign up?
Yeah, so basically it's a free website. It's called footballforfootball.com, and when you register, it'll choose your user group. You can be a parent, a player, a coach, or a fan. You've got to choose one. And if you're a parent, you'll be getting information that is pertinent to your participation, regardless of your level, whether you've got a female player, a male player. We've got players from, like I said, from guys who've won the Champions League with Barcelona to people who've played for Nantwich. So you've got a reference point all along the way. There's a play, again, everybody wants to play in the Premier League, but I did a player not so long ago. He's now an academy director, and he played professional football, no higher than League Two, but he got paid as a pro for 23 years.
Yeah.
That's massive.
That is brilliant.
23 years of football.
I would I've been on there myself, and it's like I say, it's something completely different. It's not your football website. It is what it is. It's almost like an academic resource. So it's absolutely great. I think you should also say about
it's all video as well. So it's videos. It's not just loads of text. It's real personal. It's interaction, and it's the people talking directly to you.
You do the wallpaper tutorials on there as well.
The first every 100 member gets a free roll of the old
That's what I thought, yeah. That's what I thought. Now, guys, I really would recommend that you get on there and check it out for yourselves. So we're into the last little section. So we've got lots of questions that I want to get through. In the first, I'm going to start off with a question because I'm in charge of the webinar and I've got that power. I want to get everybody's opinion on Bayern Munich announced this week that they're going to get rid of running teams from under 12s down. They want them to have a bigger grassroots experience of football. Tony, I'll start with you. We seem to be going younger and younger here, or not at all here in the cases of Huddersfield and Brentford. What do you think about what Bayern have done, and what do you think we'll do here in the future?
I like what Bayern have done. I actually think that getting kids, I know Julian's saying it's free training, but putting kids into an academy at the age of 5, 6, 7, 8 is nonsense. I don't like the idea of that at all. I think that they do it because they don't want to miss out on the next Wayne Rooney or the next young player who's going to be, you know, and everyone else does it. So if English clubs overnight just said, right, we're all going to, you know, nobody until they're 11-year-old can go into a football club, because one of the things is when they get released, when they only spend a year in the academy and then they're released, that's a rejection that I don't think many kids and potentially parents can't really handle at 8, 9, 10. So I think 11's a good age to pick. Maybe they could have picked 12, but I also think we need to improve generally the grassroots to counteract that. So what I'd like to see is more clubs sending coaches into grassroots teams to improve the standards in the grassroots teams. I know there's some really good ones in Newcastle. Some of them are very, very good. But just to get the standard in the grassroots higher and higher and higher, as high as possible, so that when they are 10 and 11, they're at a very good standard, and then they can go into clubs and make careers for themselves.
Spencer, what would the reaction be if Sheffield Wednesday said they were getting rid of anything 12 and under?
I'm not sure, to be honest, Ryan, but like Tony, I like Munich's idea, under 11s. You know, when they're 5, 6, 7 years of age, obviously before under 9s, they don't actually sign with a club. So you could have occurrences where a kid's at Everton one night, Liverpool the next, then City, then United. And we've heard of stuff like this. And it's a huge commitment for the families as well. You know, it's a huge commitment. They're only little ones. They're only, you know, 6, 7, 8, whatever it may be. But it's the families as well. And they find, you know, and they've got other kids they need to look after. They find that they're just focused on the one who's at a football club. And I don't think that's good for the families at all. When I was a lad, you know, sound like my daddy, you know, 30 odd years ago. And that's what we did. But, you know, we've got to let kids be kids, play different sports, learn different skills. You know, and I see it now in the 15s and 16s. If the boys are playing, you know, there's a school cup semi-final, they're desperate to play, and we allow them at Sheffield Wednesday. We think that's important, you know, in their social network. So for me, you know, well done, Bayern Munich. I think it's fantastic.
Brilliant. Excellent.
I remember one of the events on, and you had, remember Dan Ashworth, and what he said, what would be a good recommendation would be to just have Cat 4, because it allows that growth, and it becomes, when you become a footballer, it's important because it's going to be your job as opposed to just something you're going to be doing. And Ryan, I've just sent you that picture there. Did you get it in the WhatsApp?
I saw you sent me a picture, Julian, and normally I get worried when you send me pictures.
I only got that today off a friend of mine. That's our grassroots team. Nobody went to School of Excellences. And in that picture is 11 players. 4 played professional football for 5 years or more. Out of 11.
Yeah.
4 played, 2 played in the Premier League. That's with no academy. And like you said, because we didn't have the rejection, and we just played for the fun, and we were actually probably playing more football because the academy to stop you from playing. You know, it's training for the training. I understand that, but sometimes they negate that by allowing games.
I think the point you make as well, Ryan, is about, you know, if we're going to do it in this country, it has to be everybody. You know, we all have to do it, because, you know, clubs will always try and get that advantage as well. And will it happen? I don't know. And the flip side, of course, is, you know, there's a lot of stress on the families, like I mentioned. But if they are getting coached 4 or 5 times a week, you know, the coaching standard is hopefully getting better. There's more UEFA licensed coaches now than there ever was. Then are we producing better? So there's 2 sides to it. But my personal one would be under 11s. Great idea.
Yeah, I'm just gonna crack on with the next question, but I think that's a really good point you make there, Spencer, about having to be a collective. Tony, this is from you, from Rob. Tony, you mentioned a difficult parent earlier. How did you go about dealing with him and the impact that he was having on his son?
Well, I actually just had a grown-up conversation with him, and I said, look, if I'm going to work with you guys, you and your son, I need you to take a back seat, and I need you just to settle down a little bit, leave the football business to me, and I'll sort it for you. And to be fair to him, he got it straight away. He could have been right, see you later, or something like that, and that would have been his choice. But you know, I could have walked away. But I give him that option, and he did, and he did respect it. He only stepped over the sort of line that I'd drawn once, and I did say to him, look, you know what we agreed, you're going to take a back seat. You know, that's not taking a back seat. And he took it, and he actually, the lad signed a pro contract quite recently. He came up, he cried when his son signed the pro contract. He was quite an emotional type of guy. It was one of the best days of his life, apparently. So it had quite a happy ending, that particular player and that particular circumstance. And to be fair, the young player, he knew what his dad was like, and he was sort of on my side a little bit. He goes, "Oh yeah, I know he's like that," and he started to sort of see it from. He knew what his dad was like. He was a sensible lad, which was great as well. Yeah. So it worked out well.
Another quick one for you, Tony. Tony, with the new rules coming, this is from Marco. With the new rules coming in from FIFA, do you think there'll be exemptions from the exams like there was before for solicitors, barristers, parents and siblings? Do you think parents and siblings will there be exemptions, and will parents and siblings be in that exemption list if there is one?
I'd be guessing if I would, you know, if I think they'll come down pretty hard and make everyone do the examination and ongoing. I should have said ongoing professional development as well, because I think that'll be an element of it. So I think it'll be a one size fits all from the FIFA point of view, and I think they'll come down quite tough. And parents and siblings and everyone who's working as a football agent in that football agent space will have to adhere to the new FIFA principles. So I think lawyers and solicitors will have to register, you know, as they currently do. A lot of lawyers and solicitors currently register as agents as well with the English FA.
Yeah, there's a question for Spencer and Julian. Guys, how much emphasis do you feel, and is it enough emphasis put on scholars to continue their education? I think come to you, Spencer, first.
Yeah, absolutely. We know the chances of making it to the top of the game. We have a full-time education officer, and believe you me, he knows everything. He knows what they're doing at school and stuff. And it's good for us because as coaches, you know, I know about the players, if particularly they're not liking Spanish, you know, so I'm learning Spanish, as you know, Ryan. I'll drop a few words in and stuff. And as coaches, we have a part to play in that. And we get the information. If you're not particularly doing well, we say, hey, listen, come on, you've got to do this. It's not just about football, it's about the education.
Yeah, Julian, do you think that we know that there's a lot of emphasis and the structure on there. Do you think the players think enough about education in that scholarship time?
I think that if it comes from the top downwards, i.e. the manager, you know, has that conversation with them. For instance, I did Danny Simpson, who's obviously won the Premier League with Leicester. When he was at United, he said the school he went to, the teacher had a direct line to Ferguson, and Ferguson gave him the phone, and he could phone straight away, and he weren't playing Saturday cold ball, and that really got everybody on board. So it helps people like Spencer when they're trying to reinforce it. It come from above, and it's being driven downwards.
Yeah, I think
you want players that are educated as well, don't you? You know, they've got a lot of decisions to make in football, and the better educated generally, they're going to be better footballers.
Absolutely. I know you and I, Spencer, were talking about one of the documentaries that was on Amazon about the American football team, the Michigan State. And, you know, in America, even at that high level sport, the relationship between performance and education is much closer and has a bigger impact on like you say, Julian, whether you play or not. But also B, what level you can play at. You know, to go and play in a national Division I American Football League, you need to be an absolute brain box. You need to be high intellect. And you know, I think there's a really interesting question there about whether pushing people educationally would actually have a positive outcome on their playing development. Because like you say, Spencer, at the end of the day, they're students, and they just happen to be one of the subjects they're taking is football.
Yeah, I think you saw with the series there, Ryan, is that the NFL players or American football is how involved they are and how they lead the process in terms of how they play. The one I watched, the Arizona Cardinals, was fascinating. They played on a Sunday. Defense and attack got together separately the following day and discussed the game. And that's usually what the coach does over here, or particularly in football or soccer, as they call it. But educated guys, done the degrees, been through college, uni, and they have the ability to do that. And the more that players understand their sport, the better they're going to be.
And just to jump in there, the players who generally are the most educated are the ones who are most injured, because all of a sudden they want to know how to recover. They want to know about the cognitive load. They want to know about, plyometrics, biomechanics. Now, if they did that as a preventative measure by being educated to, that would maximize their output on the pitch.
Right, guys, we're gonna leave it there just for the questions. But before we leave you completely tonight, Tony, I just want you to say a few words about what some potential next steps could be for parents or coaches on here that we're thinking about trying to pursue this further. What's out there?
Yeah, I mean, at ASA Football Agent, we do some football agent courses. So the first step, and the step that I would recommend is, and even if you're not thinking about representing your son, you don't have to do the course with a view to becoming an agent. It's just for more information. We go into a little bit more depth. The level 1's a 3-hour course on an evening. We're doing webinars at the moment. We usually have it at football clubs, but we're doing webinars at the moment because of the situation. But we talk about things like the representation contract, which I haven't really touched on tonight. I haven't mentioned it. That is a contract between the player and the agent. That's a binding contract that sort of cements the relationship, if you like, and allows the agent to work on that player's behalf. So there's loads more stuff that we go into, and we talk about working with clubs as well. And so it just gives you more of an idea of what to expect if you are going to work with an agent as a family with your son or daughter. And I think it's worth doing. There's lots of different courses out there, but I mean, I think Spencer touched on it as well. If you can get as much information and knowledge and Julian's Football for Football resource, and you can help your son or daughter, it's only going to stand them in good stead, isn't it?
Absolutely. Right, guys, I want to thank everybody for their contribution tonight, and I want to thank everybody that's been listening in today. We were beset with a few technical problems, combination of too much wallpaper paste on Julian's wall, my girlfriend watching Tiger King, and yeah, let's throw COVID in there as well. But we got through it. And I think that was really informative for everybody that was listening. And I've had some great comments coming in and in as well. So really want to appreciate everybody for listening in. Tony we'll send you up a follow-up email in terms of some of those next steps. If you haven't downloaded the handouts that Tony produced, please do that before you log off. And yeah, just to thank Tony, Spencer, and Julian again. And everybody stay safe. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.
See you later.